The Syrian night sky in September 2014 did not hear the predator coming. Ripping through the stratosphere at a sustained velocity of Mach 1.5, the F-22 Raptor executed its historical combat debut without igniting a single afterburner. This is the brutal and unparalleled reality of Supercruise capability. Below this 20-ton apex predator, the most sophisticated S-400 anti-aircraft missile batteries sat in absolute blindness. On the high-resolution screens of hostile radar operators, this colossal machine of war registered a radar cross-section of exactly 0.0001 square meters. To put that into physical perspective, the enemy radar systems were desperately searching for a 70-foot-long fighter jet. But the sensors were only telling them they were looking at a solitary steel marble floating seamlessly through the atmosphere. The F-22 Raptor is not just an aircraft. It is a flying thermodynamic paradox designed to break the fundamental laws of atmospheric physics while remaining completely invisible to the electromagnetic spectrum. To understand the absolute mechanical violence happening inside this aircraft, you have to strip away the skin and look at the skeleton. The structural foundation of the F-22 is a monolithic frame forged primarily from titanium 6Al4V. This aerospace-grade alloy is not chosen for its aesthetic appeal, but for its absolute refusal to shatter under catastrophic physical stress. When a pilot throws the control stick into a sharp turn, the aircraft routinely pulls 9 G maneuvers. At 9 times the force of Earth's gravity, the blood drains from the pilot's brain, yet the titanium skeleton simply absorbs the massive torsional twisting forces without warping a single millimeter. This internal metal cage must also withstand the apocalyptic heat generated at the rear of the fuselage. Lodged deep within the titanium ribs are twin Pratt and Whitney F-119-PW-100 turbofan engines. These power plants are arguably the most violent internal combustion chambers ever successfully strapped to a manned vehicle. Operating at peak performance, these twin mechanical hearts generate an earth-shattering 70,000 pounds of combined thrust. That is equivalent to harnessing the raw kinetic energy of 3 massive diesel freight trains colliding simultaneously and focusing all that kinetic violence out of a pair of exhaust nozzles. But the F-22 does not just push air backward. It actively wrestles the atmosphere into submission using a 2-dimensional pitch-axis thrust vectoring system. The exhaust nozzles can instantly pivot up or down by 20 degrees, redirecting the colossal column of superheated gas. This thrust vectoring allows the 20-ton machine to perform maneuvers that would snap a conventional fighter jet cleanly in half, completely defying the standard aerodynamic limitations of forward momentum. The aircraft can essentially stall in midair, pivot on its own center of gravity, and accelerate in a completely different direction while the pilot hangs suspended in the cockpit. Surrounding these infernal engines, the internal temperatures routinely spike past 800 degrees Fahrenheit. The engineering required to prevent the jet fuel from boiling inside the tanks and the electronics from melting into toxic slag requires a thermodynamic management system that borders on science fiction. The fuel itself is circulated through the airframe to absorb the excess heat before being injected into the combustion chambers, turning the explosive liquid into an active cooling mechanism. Every single rivet, every millimeter of hydraulic tubing, and every internal bulkhead is engineered to absolute microscopic perfection to ensure the machine does not destroy itself from its own internal kinetic fury. The United States government spent nearly $67 billion developing this apex predator to absolutely dominate any aerial conflict for the next 50 years. It was a masterpiece of mechanical engineering, a titanium beast that could outrun, outturn, and outshoot anything mankind had ever bolted together. The internal weapons bays are designed to snap open, eject a 1,000-pound joint direct attack munition, and slam shut in less than a single second. This high-speed mechanical deployment ensures that the aerodynamic profile of the jet is compromised for the absolute minimum amount of time, preventing enemy radar from catching a fleeting glimpse of its internal geometry. But here's the catastrophic reality that the Pentagon desperately tries to keep out of the press briefings. The invincible titanium skeleton can deflect bullets, withstand the crushing grip of 9 times the force of gravity, and contain the fury of 70,000 pounds of thrust. However, titanium alone cannot render a 20-ton machine invisible to the electromagnetic spectrum. The true stealth capability, the absolute core of the F-22's lethality, relies entirely on a microscopically thin external skin wrapping over the titanium frame. This radar absorbent material is engineered to trap and dissipate incoming radar waves as microscopic surface heat rather than reflecting them back to the enemy receiver. But this chemical armor is the fatal Achilles heel of the greatest fighter jet in human history. It is a magic trick so pathetically fragile, so structurally compromised by its own chemical nature, that a simple heavy rainstorm, a harsh sandstorm, or the extreme friction of its own supersonic speed can literally wash and peel away the aircraft's multi-million-dollar cloak of invisibility, exposing the bleeding financial artery of the entire program and setting the stage for an engineering disaster. The brutal mathematical reality of the F-22 program is not found in the chaotic airspace over combat zones, but within the meticulously climate-controlled, hermetically sealed maintenance hangars of the United States Air Force. For every single hour, this titanium beast spends hunting enemy targets in the stratosphere. It demands an agonizing 40 hours of intensive, painstakingly slow ground maintenance. The ultimate airborne assassin is instantly reduced to a fragile, critical care patient the exact moment its landing gear touches the concrete tarmac. This staggering mechanical downtime is almost entirely dictated by the extreme, fatal fragility of its radar absorbent material coating. When the Raptor pilot pushes the throttle forward and breaches Mach 2, traveling at speeds exceeding 1,500 miles per hour, the atmospheric friction fundamentally changes state. At this supersonic velocity, the air itself ceases to be a gas and acts like a colossal, invisible sheet of heavy grit industrial sandpaper, violently scraping against the entire surface area of the fuselage. The kinetic friction generates immense surface heat that literally bakes the chemical composition of the coating. This intense thermal stress causes the highly sensitive silver-toned stealth skin to blister, crack, and violently peel away from the underlying titanium structural frame. This is not a cosmetic issue. This is a catastrophic combat failure. If even a single millimeter of this specialized electromagnetic absorbing paint flakes off the leading edge of the wing or the engine intakes, the radar cross-section of the F-22 inflates by an astonishing 300%. It instantly turns an invisible ghost into a massive, brightly glowing target on hostile surface-to-air missile radar screens. Repairing this compromised chemical armor is a logistical nightmare that completely defies the logic of rapid military deployment. Scraping and reapplying the stealth coating is not comparable to spraying paint on a commercial automobile. It is the mechanical equivalent of performing microscopic neurosurgery while wearing heavy winter gloves. Highly trained aviation mechanics are forced to don fully encapsulated, positively pressurized hazmat suits just to survive breathing near the severely toxic chemical solvents required for the job. They must painstakingly peel away the microscopic layers of cracked polymer by hand, utilizing specialized non-metallic scrapers that will not scratch the sensitive titanium substrate underneath. Once the damaged area is cleaned, the new highly classified chemical slurry is meticulously troweled onto the fuselage layer by microscopic layer. This toxic paste must then be thermally cured at exact, unforgiving temperatures for dozens of hours. If the internal hangar humidity shifts by a mere 3 percentage points, or if the ambient room temperature fluctuates even slightly, the entire batch of chemical stealth coating structurally fails to adhere to the metal. The mechanics are then forced to scrape off the ruined batch and restart the grueling, toxic process from absolute zero. The horrifying severity of this material engineering flaw was explosively exposed to the public in 2009. Former Lockheed Martin materials engineer Darrell Olson filed a massive $50 million whistleblower lawsuit against the giant defense contractor. Olson explicitly testified under federal oath that the corporation had knowingly applied defective, chemically unstable stealth coatings to the fighter jets, simply to speed up production schedules and maximize corporate profits. He revealed that the stealth skin was failing in laboratory tests, yet the jets were still delivered to the military. The Pentagon had effectively purchased a fleet of stealth fighters that were chemically deteriorating and losing their invisibility from the exact moment they rolled off the factory assembly line in Marietta, Georgia. The United States military had successfully procured the ultimate weapon of modern warfare, but the weapon was fundamentally allergic to its own operational environment. The golden radar-absorbing paint that was supposed to make the aircraft invincible was instead actively sucking the financial lifeblood out of the national defense budget. Every single time a fighter pilot pushed the aircraft to its designed physical limits, executing high G-turns or supersonic sprints, they were literally burning away millions of dollars of delicate chemical polymers. This created a perpetual, inescapable cycle of extreme physical destruction, followed by impossibly expensive chemical repair. The engineers had successfully built a terrifying ghost that absolutely dominated the night sky, but they failed to realize that this same expensive ghost would inevitably melt under the harsh, abrasive reality of the daytime atmosphere. This relentless microscopic degradation of the external skin was far more than just a technical annoyance for the ground crews. The staggering, accumulating cost of constantly replacing peeling toxic paint became the fatal catalyst for the entire aerospace initiative. It was this unstoppable financial hemorrhage, bleeding the Air Force budget dry hour by hour, that ultimately reached the cold desks of the Pentagon, accountants, and triggered the absolute kill switch for the most advanced, feared, and incredibly fragile fighter jet project in human history. The terrifying mathematics of keeping this machine airborne reach levels of absurdity that sound entirely fabricated. It cost the United States Air Force an astonishing $68,362 for a single hour of active flight time. Let that horrific financial metric sink in. That catastrophic burn rate means the fragile external stealth skin is incinerating the national defense budget significantly faster than the twin Pratt & Whitney F-119 turbofan engines are physically combusting highly refined jet fuel in the combustion chambers. The Pentagon was eventually forced to confront a very grim and inescapable reality. They possessed a weapon capable of systematically dismantling any opposing air force on the planet. but they simply could not afford the astronomical cost of turning the ignition key on a daily basis. The financial strain was immense, leading to a historic and deeply controversial decision. In 2011, the ultimate execution order was signed not by a foreign military commander deploying a brilliant counter-strategy, but by domestic politicians and stressed accountants sitting in Washington offices. Lockheed Martin, the aerospace giant that birthed this titanium beast, was officially ordered to permanently shut down and physically dismantle the massive F-22 assembly and production line. The original strategic Cold War blueprint called for a formidable, overwhelming fleet of 750 Raptors to completely blanket the globe and guarantee absolute American air supremacy for decades. Instead, the final production run was violently severed at a mere 187 combat-ready airframes. This sudden termination triggered a logistical apocalypse for the maintenance crews left behind to manage the remnants. With the complex manufacturing line completely dead and spare parts becoming increasingly rare, the surviving fleet was immediately plunged into a desperate, cannibalistic state of mechanical survival. To keep a small handful of these 20-ton titanium predators fully operational and ready for immediate combat deployment, desperate aviation mechanics are routinely forced to rip essential, highly classified internal components out of other grounded F-22s. Imagine a multi-million-dollar, state-of-the-art stealth fighter sitting helplessly in a dark hangar, being methodically stripped of its active, electronically scanned array radar modules, its intricate hydraulic actuators, and its extreme liquid cooling pumps. It is systematically gutted just to serve as a high-tech mechanical organ donor for another aircraft on the flight line. This is not how you maintain a dominant, globally projecting military force. This is how you desperately manage a decaying fleet of impossibly complex, dying luxury sports cars. The apex predator of the 21st century was ultimately defeated, forced into early retirement not by a hypersonic air-to-air missile tearing through its wing, or by a brilliant enemy tactician outsmarting its pilot, but by the relentless, cold tyranny of financial spreadsheets and microscopic structural fractures in its highly toxic chemical paint. It is a profound, deeply ironic engineering tragedy. The Raptor was originally built with singular purpose to fight a massive, technologically advanced Soviet empire that simply no longer existed by the time the stealth jet finally entered active military service. Instead of engaging in epic, world-defining supersonic dogfights against massive fleets of hostile stealth fighters over the skies of Europe, these mechanical marvels were occasionally deployed to drop GPS-guided smart bombs on low-tech insurgents driving modified vehicles in Middle Eastern deserts. It is the absolute textbook definition of using a highly sensitive multi-million-dollar laser-guided surgical scalpel to violently smash open a rotting wooden crate. The F-22 Raptor undeniably remains the absolute, undisputed king of the modern aerospace environment. Its physical kinetic capabilities are utterly terrifying. Its aerodynamic performance is legendary among fighter pilots, and its radar signature remains practically non-existent to current threat systems. If you are an enemy pilot patrolling a combat zone and an F-22 locks its internal weapon systems onto your aircraft, your very first indication of its deadly presence will likely be the violent, explosive detonation of your own fuselage. But it is a deeply flawed, tragically imprisoned king. It is a sovereign mechanical ruler permanently chained inside a heavily guarded, strictly monitored, temperature-controlled maintenance hangar. It is simply too expensive, too complex, and too chemically fragile to actually risk dying a warrior's death on the active battlefield. It stands forever as a monumental, cautionary testament to the absolute outer limits of extreme aerospace engineering, definitively proving that humans can indeed build the ultimate, unbeatable flying machine, provided they are entirely willing to bankrupt themselves just to keep the toxic stealth paint from violently peeling off the titanium frame in midair. If you want to continue exploring the dark, catastrophic failures hidden beneath the shiny, highly polished exterior of the world's most advanced military and engineering projects, make sure to subscribe to the DEFUNCT channel right now and leave your thoughts in the comments section below. We are just getting started on dissecting these mechanical disasters. Next week, we will aggressively tear open the highly classified blueprints of a legendary naval submarine that was supposedly engineered to absolutely rule the crushing ocean depths, but instead became a pressurized, catastrophic titanium coffin for its own crew due to a single, incredibly simple, and easily avoidable fatal design flaw.